Recording progress.
Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah Daf Yomi, continuing along on our learning on Pesach. Specifically, we are starting today a little bit into the daf, a huge section of 2 almost completely full pages of drashot on the Pesach story. What a great Daf Yomi coincidence. With that, we will get started with our daf. So we finished with, we're in the middle of Avshalom. We're going through the Mishna that talked about the midah kedeged midah, measure for measure. And Avshalom, we had talked about how he built this matzeva, monument, and Rish Lakish said, why did it say he took? Because he made a mekachara, he made a bad choice. Okay, he made this monument thinking he was going to be the ruler. And then we said the matzevet asher be'emek hamelech, why the emek, the valley, but the word emek also means amok, deep, and it comes from, according to Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, it was etza mukav makosh shel olam, because it said emek hamelech. It was a reference to, this was all God's plan. Why was it God's plan? Punishment to David, Yechtiv, in the top of our daf, from within your house is going to come bad, and that was told to David after he sinned with Bathsheba. Likewise, we say, we're going to have another place where it says emet, and it really meant from the deep advice of somebody else. We're now in the Yaakov and Yosef story. Yaakov sends Joseph to see his brothers, and that's when they throw him in the pit. That's when he gets down to Egypt, etc. That starts the whole thing rolling. And it says Me'emek Chevron. So Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, same rabbi. It was based on the advice of the righteous person that was buried in Chevron. Who is that? None other than Avraham. Even though it wasn't exactly Abraham's advice, actually it was God's words to Abraham, but you can't say it was God because in the other one it said Emek HaMelech. We could say, okay, it was the advice of God. In this case, we can't say that because it's Emek Chevron. It has to be somebody associated with Hebron, which isn't God, but Abraham, but it's in words that were told by God to Abraham. Right? Abraham is told in the Brit Bein HaPatanim that you're going to be a stranger, your children will be a stranger in a strange land, and they will suffer, and then I will redeem them. And that had to happen. So this was, again, from the words given to Abraham. That was what caused Yaakov to send Yosef down to his brothers. Ki amar ein li ben. So now what happened with Avshalom? He said, I don't have a son, so I'm going to make a monument, to which the Gemara says, he didn't have sons. What do you mean? Says in the pasuk, he had 3 sons and 1 daughter. First explanation, he must have not had a son that was appropriate to be king. Hold off for a minute and I'll explain. Rav Chisda says, we learn, there's a different explanation. Anyone who burns the crops of another will not end up having children to survive him. This is another measure for measure. You wipe out the crops, which are seeds, the seeds of someone else, your seeds, which are your children, will be wiped out. In Hebrew, it's the same word, zera, zera. So now they say, what did he do? He burned Yoav's fields, dichtiv, as it says, Vayomer al avadav, he said to his servants, Re'u chalkat Yoav al yadi, below sham seorim, see his section where there's barley, L'chu v'yitzitua be'esh, go light it up on fire, v'yatzitu avdei Avshalom et hachalka be'esh, and they lit it up on fire. So he had children, but they died young, and therefore he had no one to inherit him. So either his sons weren't appropriate to be king, or they died. Now we're up to the second part of the mission. Not only is there measure for measure when it comes to bad things, also good deeds get rewarded measure for measure. Midami, wait a minute, is this the same? What happened with Miriam? She waited for Moshe for 1 hour, and therefore, that's what the Mishna had said, and therefore the Jews waited for her in the desert for 7 days. So to which the Gemara says, that's not measure for measure, midami, it's not the same. She waited for 1 hour, and they waited for 7 days. Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, Ema ulinyana tova eno king. Change the Mishnah. When it comes to good things, it's not the same, it's different. So Amar le Rava said to him, but it says for the good. It says, and the same thing. You can't say it says something entirely the opposite of what it says. Ela Amarava, so Rav explains, Hachi Katani, this is what it meant to say. V'chein le'inyan tova de be'ota midah. When it comes to the tova, it's the same idea, okay, the same manner, even if it might be in a greater measure. So she waited, they waited. The timing is something different. When you get rewarded, you're always going to get more than when you get punished. So that's why it's the same concept, the same issue, but different amount of time or a different amount of reward. But so now we're going to darshan these psukim. So she stood on the side. Okay, we'll continue reading the pasuk for a minute. To know what was going to be with him. We're now going to darshan every single word in this pasuk, all 7 of them, and say, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, pasuk se kulo Hashem Shechina ne'ema. This was God behind this whole thing, and it was all the name of the Shechina with her. Okay, it was like as if God was with her. Ne'ema, vatetatzev, it says, and she stood, dichtiv, vayavo Hashem vayityatzeh. Okay, now we're going to quote a whole bunch of psukim. This is when God calls Shmuel, when Shmuel was young and he was in the Mishkan, and then God starts calling him. And then Eli thinks he's right hearing things or whatever, but that's God calls Shmuel. So vayityatzeh, God is also someone who's yityatzeh, who stands up. Right? Again, obviously not really, but the word is used. Achoto dichtiv amor lechochma achotia. Here's a pasuk in Mishle which says you should say that you should be sisters to chochma. Chochma is knowledge, and that's achoti is a reference to God. Merachok, dichtiv merachok Hashem nir'ali. From a distance, God is seen to me. So merachok is a reference to God. Lada'at, again, we're just going through every single word in that verse. Lada'at, to know, dichtiv ke'el de'at Hashem. God is the all-knowing God. Ma, dichtiv ma Hashem elokach shoel mi'imach. What? So what does God ask from you? So again, the word ma goes right next to the word with God. And then some of these are more describing God, and some of them are just more words that are connected with God in a pasuk. God won't do anything. And this is a verse from Amos. Okay, he won't unless he tells the prophets it will be. Lo, Hashem Shalom. He called him God of peace. This is a pasuk in Shoftim with Gidon. And there you see Lo goes with Hashem. So all that was a reference to say that kind of like the Shechina was with her, or she did it in the name of the Shechina, of the presence of God. Vayakam melech chadash. Okay, now we're going to see what happens in the psukim. So we were at this pasuk in Shemot Bet, pasuk Dalet. Now we're going to other psukim about the in Shemot Aleph, pasuk Chet, and we're going to start the story from the beginning. So we're going to start on a bunch of these psukim. It says in the beginning of Sefer Shemot, Vayakam melech chadash Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef. A new king came about, right? Was established, who didn't know Yosef. Rav Shmuel, we're going to see a lot of psukim here that Rav and Shmuel disagree about, and each is going to be the same structure. One said this, one said that. They don't tell you who says what. One says, really was a new king. He shifted his whole kingdom. Okay, he used to do things in one way, and then he shifted, right? He was with Joseph, he was with the Jews, and then all of a sudden he turned the other way. Manda Amar Chadash Mamash. The one who says it was a new king, why does he say that? Chadash, it says new king. New king simply sounds like new king. Umanda Amar Nitchadshuk Zerotav, what are they basing it on in the text? It doesn't say he died and then he ruled. So it sounds like he didn't die. Normally, when you have a king die, it says he died. And then it says, a new one came. Asher lo yadat Yosef, who didn't know Joseph, so then how do you explain he didn't know Joseph? He obviously knew Joseph, especially if it was the same king. Even if he wasn't, everyone knew Joseph. Well, he made himself out as if he didn't know him. Okay, we all know that people can do that. They pretend as if nothing had happened previously, right? I don't know anything about this guy. Vayoma elamo. Now he says to his nation, Kine am b'nei Israel, and then he starts to say the Jewish people are Rava Atzumi Menu, they're much greater than us. Tana, so the Braita says about this. He started this whole thing. He's the one who said, Paro himself said to his nation, oh, look, these people, we have to watch out for them. It wasn't like his advisors came. It was his idea. So therefore, he gets punished first. How do we know that? So that we know he started. He went to his nation and started complaining. This is in the Makav, the frogs. It says to you and to your nation and all your servants. So you're going to get it first. Let's be smarter than them. So I translate as them, but lo is actually singular to him. Who's the to him? It's a whole nation. Or at least it was a whole big family. Let's be smarter than God. Lo is God. How so? Let's think. What are we going to do to them? Well, if we put them in fire, it says number one, God will come in fire. And God will judge people with fire. So we want to stay away from fire. This is all, again, measure by measure. So if we start with fire, God will get us back in fire. With the sword, some people say it's a charbo shlufa biyado. In other words, God is a God of the sword. So stay away from that. But we could do it with water. God already promised he won't bring another mabul, so he can't destroy us with water. Okay, this is what they thought. We'll see in a minute they were wrong. But they said, let's throw all the babies into the water, right? And that way we can do that and God won't punish us through water. Shneamal, kimei Noach zotli, right? The waters of Noach are going to be the sun right there. This was to me, let me just read the end of that pasuk. Kimei Noach zotli asher nishpati me'avor mei Noach ora la'aretz, right? I swore that they will not go on the earth again. That's pasuk in Yeshayahu, but the point is, the waters of Noach will not cover the land anymore. But they didn't know. God will not bring it on the entire world. But he would bring water on one nation, or inami, because in the end they did get swallowed up by the water. So how do we explain that? Yam Suf, that was there, right? They drowned in the water. Midah keneged midah, again, measure for measure. Well, either God said, I won't bring a mabul, but I will bring it to the whole world, but I will bring on one particular nation, theoretically. Inami, alternatively, he won't bring it, but they might, what is a mabul? God brought the water. What happened in Kriyat Yam Suf? They went into the water, right? They went and fell into it, as it says, the Egyptians ran after the Jews and fell into the water. That was them bringing it upon themselves, not God bringing it upon them. And that's what Rabbi Elazar said. My dechtiv ki b'davar asher zadu alehem is a verse from Shmot Yuchet. This is when Yitro hears about what the Egyptians did. He said, and what God did, Atayadati ki gadol Hashem mikol Elohim. I now see that your God is the greater of all the gods. Ki b'davar asher zadu alehem. What does it mean, b'davar asher zadu alehem? To the thing upon which he brought upon them. Bikdera shebishlu banit bashlu. In the pot that they cooked, they were cooked. Right? Basically, they tried to destroy us through water. They got destroyed through water. My mashma dehai zadu lishana dikterahu. How did you get from the word zadu to a pot? Tichtiv vayazed Yaakov nizid. And they quote a pasuk where Yaakov was cooking up the lentil stew. And what do you see here? Vayazed, he cooked it up. There you see zada has the same root as cooking in a pot. When Paro decided what he was going to do to the Jews, there were three advisors who sat with him. You might be surprised by this list. Bil'am, V'Iyov, V'Yitro. Okay, Bil'am. Why Bil'am? Because it says, L'cha iyatzcha, I'm going to give you advice. So since we're talking about advice, he said to Balak, I'm going to give you advice what to do with the Jewish people on the road, how to get to them. And then we have, you can see he was obviously on Paro's side. Then we have Eov. Eov actually doesn't really give advice to his friends. He's more silent when his friends all complain. So that we're going to see his response here as well. And it also might be a way to describe why he gets punished. In the beginning of Eov, it seems like he gets punished for no reason. This Gemara is giving a reason for his potential punishment. And Yitro. Why Yitro? Because Yitro gave advice to the Jews, right? He was an advisor. He said to Moshe, this isn't a good thing that you're doing. He actually gave good advice, as opposed to Bilam, who gave advice to destroy the Jewish people, and Yitro was coming to help the Jewish people. So Bilam, we're assuming now, Bilam Shayaz, he advised them, he gets killed. Eov sheshatak nidon b'yisurim. Eov was silent. Well, because of that, he was silent. He didn't say anything, so he gets suffers. Yitro shebarach zachu mibnei banav sheyeshvu b'lishkat hagazit. Yitro ran away. He said, I'm not going to be involved in this plot against the Jews. And he ends up getting rewarded that his descendants end up sitting in the Sanhedrin that sits in the Lishkat HaGazit in the temple. They were judges. Shenemar, how do we know this? Because in Divrei Yamim it says, Mishpachot Sofrim, Yoshvei Yabetz, okay, the ones of the Sofrim, who were basically the Sanhedrin, and they were Yoshvei Yabetz, they also gave advice. They say, Tirtaim, Shimatim, Suchatim, those were the families. Hema HaKinim, these are the Kinim, okay, with a Kuf, Habaim, Machmat, Avi, Beit, Rechav, Uchtivu, Bnei Keni, Choten Moshe, the sons of the Keni were, which is the Choten Moshe, comes from Yitro's family. So here you see they were the ones who became the Sofrim. And that was his reward for running away. V'nilcham banu va'alam ha'aretz. Okay, right? Again, these midrashim, just to be clear, in general, midrashim, are not necessarily meant to be understood literally, that the three of them actually sat in the room. But it's trying to connect bad people with bad things, good people with good things, and people who are silent and just don't respond with people who are silent and don't respond, right? We're showing that people, the way they behaved in one place, perhaps they were in other places also and behaved in that way as well. Even though, right, we don't really believe that they were there necessarily. So now he says, right, what is he worried? They're going to fight against him and they're going to leave the land. Well, no, normally when you have someone living in your land and you're worried they're going to become so great and mighty, what are you worried about? They're going to kick you out of your land. So why did he say, and alinu, we're going to leave? In fact, it's funny because they do leave the land, but it's not the typical worry of a king. He really wanted to curse. He was really saying about himself. He was worried that he was going to have to leave the land. But instead of saying it about him, people don't like to, it's like bring an ayin hara. We're going to say something bad and then it'll come true. So he didn't want to say it. So he just said, they're going to leave, even though he really meant, I'm going to leave. Of course, it was ironic, foreshadowing, because that is, in fact, what happens. Should have said he put upon them sarei misim. What does it mean? Vayasimu alav. Alav is on him. On him is paro. Right? They put these sarei misim to make sure they work. Well, Tana debei Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon. He brings a bright. It says, "Melamed sheviu malbein." They brought a mold for a brick. V'talula leparo b'tzavaro. Okay, the officers of Paro stuck it on Paro's neck. This mold. Why'd they do this? Because anyone who said, oh, this isn't for me, what are you, worse than Paro? More particular that you can't work? What do you mean? If Paro can do it, you can do it. So, and this was a way to force the Jews to work. Sarei misim, so how do we get this? Well, davar shemisim. It's something that caused them to move into action. And then, right, this is all drashot to get to how we know this is the case. Sorry. Okay, so now, okay. No, I did that. Okay, Laman anoto b'sivlotam. So now again, in order to torture him in their suffering, by him, anotam mibayle should have been to torture them. Laman anoto leparo b'sivlotam di Yisrael, in order to torture Paro, in order to make the Jews work. Again, the same idea here. That's why he had to have this thing around his neck. But even arei miskenot leparo. Why are they called arei miskenot? Right, at Pitom ve'et Ramses. So first we're going to darshan arei miskenot, then we'll get to Pitom and Ramses. So what are miskenot? Rav Shmuel, again, they have a debate. They make their owners suffer. They endanger the owners. The others say they cause their owners to become poor. Misken is like a nebach. Okay, they cause their owners to be poor. So now what is this? Anyone who deals with building, you might know this if you do construction in your house, you end up becoming poor because you end up spending so much money, it always costs more than you think. That's one possible way of reading it. Who did it make poor and who did it endanger? So some people say it's the people who build are in danger. This is any builder, right? It's dangerous. You climb up on high ladders, you might fall. There's all sorts of hazards in the job. That's number one. And then it was the Jews. Number two, it makes them poor because they have to spend a lot of money on things. Now, this wasn't really true because the Jews weren't really building for their own sake and from their own pocket. Rashi brings that explanation, but he also brings an explanation that we're talking about the Mitzrim. Okay, this, what I said, was actually Rashi's second option. Rashi's first option is that it actually endangered the lives of the Egyptians. Why is that? So there's a midrash that says that the Egyptians, when the Jews wouldn't work, they'd put babies into the clay that they were using to make the bricks, and they would put Jewish babies in there, and then built into these pyramids or whatever it was they were building were Jewish babies. So now that endangered the lives of the Mitzrim. Why? Because at the end, when they were about to drown in the Yam Suf, so some of the angels of the other nations came to kind of went out to bat for them and said, don't destroy them. And then once Gabriel came, the angel of the Jews, and he said, hey, look what they did. Look at these babies in these buildings. They killed Jewish babies. That was the end of it. And that sealed their fate. So that's a possible, it's a midrash in Yalkut Shimoni. And based on that midrash, we could potentially understand this Gemara. And it made them poor. Why did it make them poor? Because in the end, we left taking the jewels of the Egyptians. So that also made them poor. Next. Et Pitom ve'et Ramses. So what are these names? Rabbi Shmuel. Chadam are Pitom Shma. The real name is Pitom. V'lamar Kashma Ramses. Why Ramses? Sharishon Rishon Mitroses. It starts to slowly fall apart. These were built poorly. The Chadam are Ramses Shma. V'lamar Kashma Pitom. Sharishon Rishon Pitahom Bo'o. Slowly, the ground would swallow up what they were building. V'chasher ya'anu oto ken yevbet v'chen yiflot. As they tortured him, they would get greater and greater. Again, you have the problem oto. It should be really otam. The Gemara doesn't ask that here. Ken rabu v'chein partsuma mibayle. It should have said they, as much as you torture them, they became greater. They became multiplied. But they multiplied. But why does it say they will multiply? They will become more. It's the Ruach HaKodesh that was saying, Ken Yerbeh v'chein yiflot. This is our theme always of Jews, right? No matter what you do to us, we will still continue to grow and multiply. So it was a prophecy for the future of the Jewish people. Vayakutsu mipnei bnei Israel. What does it mean, vayakutsu? They looked at the Jews, and their eyes were like thorns in their side, as we said. This word parach appears first in chapter 1, verse 13, which is what we just read. And then in the next pasuk, it says they embittered their lives with hard work, with chomer and levanim, okay, with building bricks, ubechol avodah b'sadeh, with all the work in the fields, et kol avodatam asher avdu b'hem b'farach, all the work that they worked them b'farach. So we have vayavidu b'nei Yisrael b'farach in pasuk Yud Gimel. The next pasuk at the end of the pasuk, after it describes all the work they did, it again mentions parach. So what is parach? Now we're on Amud Bet. Rabbi Elazar Amar b'peh rach, with a soft mouth, which means they kind of said, "Oh, let's go do something fun today. Let's go build Pitom and Ramses." Right? They got it. They got them to start working in a very nice way until they became mean later. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar b'pricha. Different explanation. They broke them down. Parech is like to break things into particles. They broke the Jews into particles. They basically, they broke their backs. They broke their will to live, right? They basically started destroying them. So two very different approaches to what parach is. Okay, we're going to get back to the parach in a minute, because as I mentioned, it appears twice. So we're going to talk about this soon. So then it says they embittered their lives with hard work and chomer, levanim, with all these bricks and mortar. Amar Rabba, b'tchila b'chomer v'levanim. Notice it said b'chomer v'levanim, and then it said, and all work in the fields. And only after that did they make them work the fields. Why? Because working in the field is more humiliating. So we go from less humiliating work to more humiliating work. Then at the end of that sentence, again, it mentions parach. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Shayu machlifim melechet anashim lenashim umelechet nashim lanashim. It's a very interesting answer. He says, what was the parach here? So he says here, it was that they, right before it says he broke them down, then it says he would give the male jobs to the females and the female jobs to the males, right? Now, we all know, right? I do certain things in the house. Other people do other things, right? You try to do someone else's job, right? Whether you talk about male-female differences or not male-female differences, it's just you're used to doing one thing, you now have to do something else. It's very jarring. You don't know how to do it. It's much harder work. So something that might be easy for one person, if they're not used to it, it's going to be much harder. And not to mention, if you want to talk about male-female differences, right? If if you go to the stereotypical, the men were carrying heavy things and then make the women do that. That's really hard. The women were cooking the food, make the men cook it. Again, I'm obviously dealing with major stereotypes here, but, it might be very hard for them to do. So either which way, it's a funny line. It's basically, that's how they work them hard, by swapping jobs. It's a very easy way without having to make anyone work, do anything crazy. Just by doing that, it's enough of a complicated job. And if you said before that it was with a soft, they did it kind of nicely to get them into it. But by this point, after they made them do all the hard work, at this point, it was clearly they were breaking them down. Okay, so Rosh Shmuel Bar Nachmani, who first said he broke them down, then he did even worse by swapping the jobs. Then, according to the first opinion, where it's the perach, now they're going to say he started off with parech as perach. The second parech is clearly breaking them down. Darash Rav Avir. Because of the reward for the Nashim Tzidkaniot, the righteous women that lived in that generation, it was on their merit that the Jews were saved from Egypt. This is one of the reasons why, when they explain 4 kosot of wine the women have to do, why do the women are they obligated? Because they were also part of the miracle. And in fact, they helped bring about the miracle, just like Esther, Megillat Esther. Okay, and the story of Purim, same thing. That's why women are included in the mitzvah on Purim. So, famous sugya also in Megillah and also in Psachim, in Arvei Psachim. So now let's hear a long version. You might know the story somewhat, but this is a very long version of the story. There's different versions of the story in all sorts of places. Here's one. When they would go get water, God would make sure that when they got the water, there were fish in them. So they would take half water, half fish. When they got back from the well, they would bring, or from wherever they were drawing the water, they would put 2 pots up. One hot water, which you see they're going to wash their husband's feet with it after they come home from a hard day of work. And one of fish. They would go to their husbands in the fields. They would wash their feet. They would anoint them. Feed them with the fish. And then they would drink. And then they would go in between the borders, between the fields. I guess it was a more secretive place. And they would seduce them there. Okay, they quote a pasuk from Tehillim about sleeping between the shvatayim, which they say are between the borders of the fields, and bischar, and then you'll see the rest of that pasuk in a minute. Bischar tishkavun ben shvatayim zachu Yisrael lebizat Mitzrayim. As a reward for doing that, they ended up coming out with a lot of money. As it says at the end of that pasuk, kamfei yonah nechpeh b'kesef, the wings of the dove are covered with silver. Ve'evrotah b'yirakrak charutz, and their evarim, or maybe it means something else, but is covered also with gold. Okay, yirakrak is green, but often it means yellow, and here it means gold. Okay, with pure gold. So now they end up coming out with all these jewels because of what they did about tishkavun ben shvatayim, and that's what the women induced the men to do. So now they get pregnant, they go to their houses. And now we're going to see a famous pasuk from Shiur Shirim, which they explain in this way. And other places, we'll see it means something else. But when it came time to give birth, they go out to the fields under the apple trees. Why? Because the Mitzrim would know if they gave birth at home. So if they give birth in the fields, they could do it secretly. And it's kind of out there, but not the place where you would be expecting for people to give birth, under the apple tree. I seduced you under the apple tree. Now, normally we would think, and they often use it in the context of this story, and it actually means that they seduced their husbands under the apple tree. But here it means, right, because remember, the whole thing is that the husbands didn't want to have children, because they said, what, I'm going to bring children into the world in this devastating society, and they're just going to have to be slaves. And the women said, no, we need Jewish continuity. And also the fact that they were going to kill their children. So the women, what does it mean here? I encouraged you under the tree. I encouraged the fetuses to come out. In other words, the mother said, we know it's almost time. I want them to come out before their time. So they encouraged them under the apple tree to come out. And it's time to the fetuses, not to their husbands. Okay, there were all these things they would used to do. They would lay out the body, set up the limbs properly. Comes up another sugyot. So God would basically, from the heavens, he would make sure the babies came out right, even though they didn't have any midwives. And then he made for them these two circles, maybe stones or something. And then one oil came out of them, one honey came out of. This is a pasuk in Hazinu, in the song in Hazinu, that you will be nursed from honey and oil, from the rock, okay, from the stone. Now, when the Egyptians got wind of this, so they went to kill them. A miracle happened. These little babies that were just born get swallowed up by the ground. Interesting story. You'll wait and see what happens. And the Egyptians realized this. So what they do? So they started plowing the fields with oxen. Okay, here's a pasuk which talks about on my back. They plowed. And it's talking about the enemy, and they basically say this must be the Egyptians. It's a pasuk from Tehillim. And then they say, okay, oh, did I skip? I skipped something. I skipped a line. I just realized. Okay, going back a few lines, sorry. When they said it's like a midwife who fixes the children, it says, how do we know that God did it? Because it says in a pasuk, and there's a pasuk in Yechezkel, that several of the pasukim from this chapter in Yechezkel we say at the Seder. Okay, so this is one of them. We don't say it, but it says, when you were born, lo charatz sharech u'b'mayim lo ruchatz l'mishi. Okay, they didn't cut the umbilical cord and you weren't washed in water properly. So it's saying, right, it didn't happen, but right, God ends up doing it for them. And then, okay, going back now to where we were. So after they go, after they finished plowing the fields where these Jewish babies were kind of swallowed up into the ground, apparently they didn't get killed. So they slowly start coming out like the way grass grows. So the children start popping out from under the ground. Shene'emar, how do we know this? And here's this pasuk from Yechezkel that might sound familiar that we say at the Seder. I made you like the things growing in the fields. So that's what they were saying about the babies. And as they grew older, and then they would go in flocks back to their houses. It sounds like, like they lived in the jungle for all these years. And only when they were in these packs would they then start coming back into the town where the people were living. Shene'emar, how do we know this? Again, those psukim from Yechezkel. So you grew up and then you ended up coming ba'adi adayim, which usually means jewelry. Don't say ba'adi adayim as jewelry, but you came in packs, flocks, like sheep. And now, why was it so important to say there were these miracle children who somehow managed to grow up on their own like this? Because when God appeared on the Yam, the other Jews never knew of miracles, but they realized this was God. How do we know it? In Shirat Hayam, it says, this is my God, and I will praise his name. But why? How did they know this was God? This is God means you have to recognize him. Only these miracle children recognize God. Now we're going to get to the Miyaldot, famous psukim. Vayomer melech Mitzrayim leMiyaldot Ivriyot. He went to the Egyptian, the Paro went to the Egyptian, Paro went to the Jewish midwives and said to them, right, and basically told them, I'll read the psukim. It says, one was Shifra, one was Pua. Today we'll see the midrashim on who Shifra and Pua were. And then he said to them, when you give birth to, when you help them give birth, and you see them on the avnaim. We'll talk about what this word avnaim is. In benu, if it's a son, v'hamitenoto. You should kill him. If it's a bat, you can keep her alive. If it's a girl. So Rabbi Shmuel, Chanamar, again, another debate between Rabbi and Shmuel. One said Isha Ubita was a woman and her daughter. The Chanamar Kala v'chamota was a woman, a mother-in-law and her daughter-in-law. Mandamar Isha Ubita, Yocheved Miriam. Mandamar Kala v'chamota, Yocheved Elisheva. Either was mother and daughter, Yocheved and Miriam, or was mother and daughter-in-law, Elisheva was the wife of Aharon. Tanya Kamandamar Isha Ubita, and this is definitely the more famous one. One, this Braita now proves a woman and her daughter, meaning Yocheved and Miriam. Shifra zo Yocheved. Why was she called Lamani Kashma Shifra? If her name was Yocheved, Shemeshaperet et Havlad. This is what we talked about before. She fixes up the baby when the baby comes out. Davar achel, Shifra sheparu ravu Yisrael b'yameh. That because of her, right, they continued to multiply. Pu'ah, so Miriam, lama nikra shma pu'ah. Pu'ah is generally to make noises. Shaita pu'ah umosiat havlad. She would make noises to get the baby to come out. Davar acher, because again, the whole idea was we wanted to get the babies out before the mitzvah knew that they were giving birth, and then they could save. She apparently would scream in the streets that I have a prophecy that my mother is going to give birth to the future savior. Maybe it was a way of encouraging the Jews to keep going on. Right? You always need hope to hang on. But so my avnayim, what is this avnayim? He gave them a sign to know. Paro also knew these women were smart and that they were going to try to give birth the mothers before the midwife came. So he said, I'm going to give you a sign to know when they're giving birth so that you can make sure you get there before and make sure you take away and kill the baby. Amar lehem, when she's ready to give birth, her thighs begin to get cold like stone. So therefore, when you see that, you'll know she's about to give birth, and then you'll make sure that you help birth the baby, and you'll kill the baby. Some people say it's when we went to it's a pasuk that says when they went to the craftsman, he was working on the avnaim. What does a yotzer have? What kind of avnaim? He has a block in the middle. He's a potter. So he basically straddles his legs, one on either side, and the implement in the middle. Same thing with when a woman gives birth. So that's what it means on the avnaim. It was basically the kind of chair or bed that the woman was on. He's a son, you should kill him. How would they know if it was a son? So right, it comes out head first. The idea is that he gave them a sign how to know whether it was a boy or a girl. So if there was a boy, they would kill the boy before it even came out of the mother's womb. The boys always, this is what they believe, right? Or at least what Paro said, according to this midrash, the boys are going to come out with their head face down, and the girls are going to come out with their head face up. Head face up, you know it's a girl. Head face down, you know it's a boy. But Rashi says this is because this is the position in having relations, is the man is on top, the woman is on the bottom. We saw about that in the past, or we'll see in the future, about that's the more sanua, the more modest way to do things. So they feared God and didn't do like what he said. It should have said, right? Why does it say elehen and not lahen? And Rashi says elehen is often used by yavo eleha. He had relations with her. So it sounds like there was some sexual something going on. We tried to seduce them, but it didn't work. They kept the children alive. It's not just that they didn't kill them. Ella, it says means they sustained them. Must be called them. They were also so great that they not only didn't listen to Paro and help them live, but they also gave them food and drink. But okay, says they said to him, listen, the Jewish wives, like, what are we going to do? The Jewish women are not like the Mitzrim; they're chayot. And what is chayot? My chayot, ilam chayot mamash. Chaya also means a midwife, and it also means animals. If they mean a midwife, if I'm a midwife, I need a midwife to help me give birth. It's not like I could do my own birth. This nation is like animals. Animals give birth on their own. How do we know this? Yehuda, it says Gor Aryeh. Okay, we're going to now see all these tribes, and they're connected with animals. Yehuda is a lion. Dan Yehidan Nachash. We saw that all with the things about Shimshon is a snake. Naphtali Ayala Shlucha is an ibex. Yisachar Chamor Garem, a donkey. Yosef Bechor Shur is an ox. Binyamin Ze'ev Yitrach, he's a wolf. And Dechtivbe Ktivbe, so all the tribes where it says Udelo Ktivbe, and if it didn't, well, there's a general pasuk. Ma'imcha Ktiv, Ma'imcha Lavi Ben Arayot Ravatza. Your mother, the lioness, was between all the lions. So here you see Jews are compared to animals. So in this way, they were saying they give birth on their own. When they feared God, right? Because they feared God, God made them houses. What are houses? Doesn't mean physical house. Rabbi Shmuel Chanamar Batei Kuna Ulevia, he built them Kohanim and Leviim to come from them. The Chanamar Batei Malchut. Second one said it's kings. Mandamar Batei Kuna Ulevia Aharon and Moshe. Right, they're Kohanim and Leviim. The one who so the one who said Kuna, that's what they mean. Mandamar Batei Malchut, who came from Miriam. David Nami Miriam Ta'at. David also came from Miriam. Dichtiv Vatamat Azuva. Vayikach lo Kalev et Efrat, Vatela lo et Cho. Azuva, who was the wife of Kalev, she died. Then Kalev took Efrat. According to the Midrash, Azuva is Efrat, and it's Miriam, all of them. And one was before she got leprosy, and one was after she got healed from leprosy. It was as if she died, because Mitzvah is like death. And she ends up with this different name, Efrat. And then she has Chor. From there, David ben Ish Efrati, which connects him to Efrat. Kalev ben Chetzron olidit Azuva isha ve'et Yiriot. Okay, this is strange. Kalev married Miriam. Why does it say here he gave an Azuva? Why does it say he gave birth to Azuva? We're going to have to deal with that tomorrow. And Eila baneha yesher shavav ardon. Okay, what it means, Holid, means he had children with rather than he actually gave birth to. Ben Chetzron ben Yefunehu. So now we have a problem with this pasuk. Wait, Kalev ben Yefuneh, wasn't that his name? Why is it calling Kalev ben Chetzron? So they say ben Yefunehu. I'm sorry, that was the question. Ben Shepana me'atzat meraglim. His real name was, his father's real name was Chetzron. But he turned away from what the Meraglim, the spies, said. Because of that, he got the name Ben Yefuneh, turned away. Ba'akati ben Knazu. But there's a different pasuk. Dichtiv, vayikadeh Otniel ben Knaz, achi Kalev. There's Otniel ben Knaz captured this area. He was the brother of Kalev. So it wasn't his father. Otniel's father is Knaz. Obviously, Kalev's father is Knaz. Well, not necessarily. Amarava Chorgo de Knaz Haya. He was they shared the same mother, okay, and not the same father. Daikanami Dichtiv HaKnizi. Also, they called them the Knizi, and from there Shmamina. Okay, we'll stop here for today. What we basically did was we started with drashot on Avshalom and the Midah Keneged Midah there. From there, we got to Miriam and how Midah Keneged Midah in a positive way, and from there we got to all sorts of drashot about what she did and other things relating to the whole Pesach story. Like I said, fabulous to have this in the middle of Pesach, and we will continue with this, another hold off of this tomorrow. Wishing everybody Moadim L'Simcha.